Hi, my name is Melvin Marsh, and I was asked by some friends who wanted to know what it was like to be a researcher. So I figured maybe I would put together some questions and answer them and see if I can't get a few other people that are in different fields to also answer, and maybe some students would get a good idea of as to what research is like, whether it's a qualitative or quantitative type research, whether it's mixed methods, or depending on what even field they're in, because everybody's a little bit different. Now, as for me, I actually have experience in multiple fields. I have experience as an anthropology researcher, both biological and cultural, as well as biocultural, which is a whole nother set of research methods. I'm most known right now for being a psychology researcher. I primarily work with like aerospace and space analogs, though I also have done many other things as well in psychology. So one of the questions I think everybody should ask and answer is, what is your position? So I've worked my way up from unpaid research intern, which was many years ago, to principal investigator, which is the highest person in any part of research projects. Usually they are the ones that are completely designing everything. They're in charge of getting the grants, building the research project, going through IRB if necessary, as well as writing it up and presenting it and all of that stuff. I'm eventually going to have another video on what like a PI is and all the different research things. But that is my current position. Is primarily I'm functioning as either principal investigator or a co-principal investigator on various projects. I have 2 master's degrees. Frequently, master's is usually the lowest level you'll need to become a principal investigator, although it is actually much more common to have a PhD, probably because, that's the best and easiest way to get these jobs. But usually a master's level person would be more than qualified to do that position. Sometimes bachelor's as well, but you will primarily see the minimum job application wise to be a master's with a couple of years of experience, or a PhD with multiple years of experience. So one of the first question that I ever got asked was, how do you make money as a researcher? Well, there's a few different ways of doing that. You can simply go off and get a job as a researcher, that project that they are interested in researching. You are probably not the principal investigator at this point, but it is a way to get one's feet wet if you're interested in that. So you could start that. You could eventually get higher up, become your own principal investigator, but possibly still working for a company. You can also be working for a university, of course. All or most of your professors, assuming you're a student, at one point was a principal investigator in at least one project, mostly multiple at this point, because your thesis would sometimes have you as the principal investigator or the co-investigator. Same thing with dissertation, which is just a really big thesis, at least in the United States. In other countries, they've flipped those 2 words. But you can also be available as a consultant, a research consultant, and these would be more common for for positions that or jobs that are shorter term, but they don't have necessarily enough money to hire on a full-time researcher, PI, whatever, or maybe they can't find somebody in that area or with a certain skill set. All of those would also be possible. The salary for researchers, at least in my experience, can start off as basically, my first position was an unpaid position at Zoo Atlanta, for 6 months working with so the Golden Lion Tamarins, I believe. It was in the primatology department. It was an unpaid position, but frequently you are going to need to start out at pretty cheap, pretty low level to work your way up. But from there, I moved to a paid position, which was a little bit over minimum wage at the time. At the time, minimum wage was $5.25. I made $8 an hour as a research assistant in anthropology. And from there, I have had salaries all over the place, but the normal salary as far as is actually based on hourly, because I'm usually a consultant. Usually it would be, if I'm my own self, would be somewhere between 50 to 70 an hour, sometimes a little bit more, but I kind of had some very unusual master's degrees, which don't usually have that much of an overlap. So that is what you could potentially expect to make. But if you are a consultant, you are in charge of dealing with your own retirement, all your own insurance and everything else. If you are looking to be an employee, you're looking at, I've seen numbers up to, $250,000. Most people are not going to go there. Most people are probably going to be starting maybe 70 to 80 with a master's, and they can go up, to mid 100s or higher, depending on everything. But it is a great little job if you can get it. But it is super, super competitive. And if you do decide to do this job, you're probably going to be working with people, or competing against people rather, that have been researching for many, many years. Most people that do become professional researchers do start in undergraduate. I had the 6-month internship at the zoo, research assistant position, research internship position, whatever, for 6 months my sophomore year. And then I had my work study my senior year, and I also did a thesis, but I'm not even counting the thesis. But if I did count the thesis, that would be another, that was 2 years there. And then you go off to graduate school, you will probably get more experience there, at least you should be getting more experience there, and get a master's or another master's or PhD or whatever you need to get, and then you work hard and eventually you get some positions. Let's see, when I am working with people, because somebody did ask, what's the average education level of the people in my lab? I don't really tend to have a lab. I tend to do a lot more work, not specifically doing a lab, but a lot of research work. I do a lot of field work. I've actually done archival work, field work, some lab work. You name that type of work I've done. I've also done clinical research as well, which, by the way, also does tend to pay a little bit more. But when I do have people who are working with me, usually they have a bachelor's degree, and I'm teaching them how to research. And sometimes I will take people that that don't have a bachelor's degree, and we'll start off very basic and just have them maybe run a few subjects or something that's unlikely to be terribly destructive to the research. But the higher level of the education, usually the more responsibility somebody has to work. And don't mind me, this is just controlling the camera. So, but I do talk with my hands, sorry, Italian. Let's think of I personally do like being a researcher. I think it gives a lot of freedom, especially if you are somebody who's very, very curious about the world. It's very, very different than, say, if you went off and got a regular 9 to 5 in an office, which, I mean, some researchers kind of still do. But this is a job where, you don't necessarily have to show up in a suit and tie necessarily to work every day. I sometimes will just do the button up. Sometimes I'll show up in Hawaiian shirts. You know, if I'm out in the field, I do wear appropriate, you know, weather gear, usually cargo pants, and sometimes look vaguely like, you know, Indiana Jones. Um, but I also have, you know, equipment attached to me, you know, usually medical stuff because I'm also an EMT. So I do work with a lot of, when I do field work, I try to make sure that everybody is also safe. So I'll tell you some of the things that I like the most, as well as things I like the least about this job. I already did specify that it is pretty easy to deal with. I don't have to necessarily dress up every day. This could change if I work in a corporate position. I do wear ties occasionally, but most of my current stuff I don't necessarily have to do that. I do like the freedom about all of that, of course, as I mentioned. And I'll tell you the one thing I really don't like, and I don't think most researchers do like this position, but because they don't really like, you know, writing grants. That's usually the thing that if somebody leaves research, it's usually because they're just frustrated with writing grants and trying to get them. And writing grants is a very big, challenging situation, and there's no guarantee that you are going to ever get a particular grant. And if you don't get funding, your research project might terminate, unless you are able to do some of that. If you are a college professor, you know, it might be okay, because if you're tenure track, you know, you do get, the more money you get, the more likely it is you're going to get tenure. But if you're already tenured, you might be able to take your project that maybe didn't get grant funded this first season. I think season's the professional word rather than session. And you can try it again the next time, or with a little bit changes. There will always be something to do, because you don't have to worry as much about getting fired. But so the grant writing is usually the thing that kills a lot of people. But a lot of people are, you know, still love doing their job. I would also like to point out some qualities that might be very helpful if you want to see if maybe something like this is a job for you. Now, being a researcher of pretty much any type, from the lowest level on, realistically, you have to have a sense of maturity. If you are not mature, you may cause more problems. If you have some type of issue, and you are, you know, you really don't like listening to other people, if you're in a situation where you have responsibilities, and you just simply need to listen to whoever your supervisor is. You know, you can save the recklessness until you are a PI on your own. But people who spend time building a research projects can cost as little as a couple $100 to several $1 million. I've worked on projects where the grant I helped them get was something like $2 million, or maybe it was more than that, but I think it was like $2 million. That's a lot of money. And now, research jobs can have hours that are very normal, just a couple of hours a day, to 16, 18-hour days. It depends on the project itself. If you're on one of these projects that is a lot of work, you know, a single error can possibly screw up, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. And that's a really important thing to know. So you have to, like I said, you have to be responsible, you have to be mature. If you're somebody who's still asking, you know, for a lot of help for very, very basic tasks, just, you know, even outside of the lab, you probably should reconsider this type of job. Most researchers also tend to do a lot of reading. They tend to do a lot of writing because writing is how we get paid realistically. The more we publish, the more likely we are to get grants in the future. So we spend a lot of time reading and writing. If you're not really a person who loves to read, at least in your field. I mean, I don't really like reading fiction. I do like reading nonfiction. But if you're a person who would rather not read and outsource that, you probably shouldn't be in this job. If you are a person who does a lot of thinking but does not necessarily do a lot of doing, that's also problematic. There have been a lot of people who think that research is just literally us sitting around thinking about things, which, yes, we are thinking about things. That's absolutely true. However, we also are thinking not only about the project, alternative theories, possibly, depending on the job and project, but also we have to sit there and work out how to build this project and how to have it work. We can't sit there for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, just sitting around pondering with our finger up our nose. Otherwise, we're not going to have a lot of good information, good data, and that basically will destroy whatever project we're trying to think about. But we do tend to have to move quickly. Additionally, we do also have to write fairly quickly, because if we don't write quickly and somebody else is working on the same project, it's entirely possible that they will publish first. And if they publish first, then it's entirely possible that, because if they get it up fast enough, that if we're working on the same project, journals don't want you to necessarily do the same project. So it is entirely possible that it would get rejected simply because somebody else published it first, or something very similar as well, first. That's very field dependent, I'll tell you. I will say that, because you're gonna, some fields, I think astronomy will let you verify, but psychology for a very long time was not encouraging replications or anything even remotely close to replications. That has changed now. So maturity, enjoying love of reading and writing. Again, that writing situation, you also have to be very, very ethical in that. None of this plagiarism. Somebody who is plagiarizing can very much lose their career just because of one error. And I had an issue with that a few months ago. Well, at this point, it was about a month ago, I think, where somebody was writing an abstract and they copied something from Wikipedia. I had already kind of suspected something was a little bit off and ran it through a plagiarism checker and found something like 18% of it was plagiarized. That it was a good thing I checked that. The person has the person now is very much aware of what he did, and hopefully it won't happen again. But if you do that and get caught just once, it is entirely possible that your career will be over very, very quickly. The president of Harvard a few months ago, I'm filming this in February 2024, President Gay, I believe her name was, she did not lose her job because she, of the incident with Israel, when they was like, when they were like, hey, are you saying that it's okay to harass Jewish students? And she couldn't say that that this genocide was even a bad thing, and that she wouldn't actually defend any of the Jewish students outside of basically saying the Hamas supporters were correct. she lost her job because they did a check because they found they thought something was a little miss, and they checked all of her stuff and they found out there was a bunch of plagiarism, and that's how she got her position. So, so being ethical is very, very important, as well as that. So, you should also need to be careful about when you do fill out your stuff for IRB that you actually are doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not extending projects just to assure that your requirements are, what you think is correct happens. You should hit, sure hit your requirements, whatever you need to do. But if things are not looking good, don't extend the experiment just because you want your results to happen, which is another project that I'm also aware of that is doing that as well. So I hope this answered at least some of the questions that people might have about being a researcher. I am going to try and reach out to some of my friends and see if I can't get some other people who will also answer similar questions, because they probably have very, very different opinions for everything and experiences than I do, because I did jump from field to field a number of times. So I can speak a little bit about many fields as opposed to just having a traditional research path. But I do hope that this helps. Please feel drop a comment, or even if there were additional questions I may have missed that you may have had, because I just took some of the questions that seemed logical and that have been directly asked, having been spoken to during meetings, asking, "Hey, how are you a professional researcher?" So hope you guys have a wonderful term, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.